So, the streets are talking. And this time they are saying that Beyoncé is finally at the center of the wildest allegation of her entire career, because sources are claiming that Orlando Brown straight up announced on camera that the most protected woman in music has allegedly been living with a life-changing diagnosis for years. And that is exactly why the internet has stopped laughing and started digging through 25 years of buried stories. Allegedly, the Carters are not just sitting quiet this time. And word is that people from inside that machine, from ex-employees to former friends to an actual licensed attorney, have all been circling the same secret. A secret somebody is reportedly trying to sell, and somebody else is reportedly trying to bury before the whole world sees it. I know some of y'all have been side-eyeing Beyoncé for years, but for the accusation to be coming from a man who looked into a camera and said it with his whole chest, baby, that is entirely something else. Okay guys, if y'all have noticed, a whole lot of the stories piling up around Beyoncé lately are not about cheating, not about money, and not about the usual marriage rumors. Now, because the word silence has basically become internet code for the Carter brand strategy, people are saying that the quiet is not classy anymore. It is suspicious. In fact, there have been blind items and courtroom whispers floating around for years saying Beyoncé runs the tightest ship in the industry, and allegedly, Orlando is out here saying he can finally confirm why. Allegedly. Guys, allegedly. But anyway, honey, as much as we have not seen one single piece of paper, y'all must admit it is getting real hard to brush this one off when the same name keeps landing in the middle of every single story. Honestly though, when the accusations involve secret tapes, restraining orders, a dead rap legend, and a lawyer saying someone more high profile than Diddy has a very expensive problem, the internet stops calling it gossip and starts calling it a biography. But before you roll your eyes and scroll away, I need you to hear one thing, because it is the part that changes everything. The people talking this time are not the usual suspects. The name at the center of this storm is the one name we all agreed we would never touch. And the accusation that has been sitting in the middle of this conversation for weeks is one that nobody, and I mean nobody, ever thought they would hear attached to Beyoncé in a million years. Everybody, I'm going to say it out loud because somebody has to, and if you have been on this app longer than 10 minutes this week, you already know what I am talking about. The most protected woman in entertainment. The woman who built an empire on silence and perfection and control. Beyoncé. And the claim at the center of it all is not about a cheating scandal, not about a business deal gone wrong, not even about the wild things people have whispered about her marriage for 2 decades. The claim is a health claim, a life claim, a claim so personal, so serious, and so explosive that most media outlets will not even repeat it on camera. But the internet does not have an editor, and it has been running with this one for weeks, because the receipts people are digging up are the reason it refuses to die. Now, before I go any further, let me be very clear about something, because I know exactly how these videos get clipped and twisted and weaponized. I do not have medical records. I am not a doctor. I have not seen one single piece of paper that proves one single thing. Everything you are about to hear is a claim, made by specific people, and I am going to name every single one of them. I am going to tell you exactly what they said, and then I am going to show you the counter case. Because there is a counter case, and it deserves airtime too. But here is the thing about 2026. In 2026, we learned that the ones we laughed at sometimes turned out to be the ones holding the receipts. In 2026, we learned that the stories that sound crazy in March have a funny way of not sounding so crazy by June. And in 2026, the conversation has finally reached the throne. So buckle up, because this is the story of the rumor that could bring down the most carefully constructed image in the history of popular music. And it starts with a name most of y'all never expected to hear in this context. That name is Orlando Brown. And I already know what you are thinking, because everybody thinks the same thing. Orlando has spent years being dismissed, mocked, and written off by this very industry. And honestly, that is fair. For a long time, it was easy to look at him and see exactly what the entertainment machine wanted you to see. A former child star who went through very public struggles. A man whose word most sensible people would not build a news story around. That was the narrative, and for years nobody challenged it. But here is the thing about the era we are living in. The people the industry taught us to ignore have a strange habit of being right. The people we scrolled past have a strange habit of holding documents we never knew existed. And Orlando has been on Beyoncé's neck for weeks, going harder than almost anybody else in this conversation, with a confidence that has made a lot of people stop mid-scroll. Because this time, he did not just drop a vague hint. He did not say something that could be interpreted 9 different ways. He looked into a camera and said the thing out loud. He said Beyoncé has allegedly been living with a full-blown diagnosis for years. He said it on camera. He said it multiple times. And when people questioned him, when people reminded him exactly who he was talking about, he doubled down. He was quoted saying, Verbatim, yesterday I said Beyonce got AIDS, and people asked me why I was not dead after I said it. Now think about that for a second. Think about the level of confidence it takes to say something like that about the most powerful couple in entertainment. There are really only two explanations, and I need you to sit with both of them. Either Orlando Brown has completely lost his mind and is saying reckless things for attention, or Orlando Brown believes he knows something. And in 2026, those two explanations used to be identical, but they are not anymore. Because the moment he opened his mouth, the internet stopped laughing and started digging. And what they found turned this from a punchline into a pattern. See, the smartest thing about the way this story unfolded is that it did not start with Orlando. Orlando is just the match. The fire was already there, stacked and waiting, built over 20 years. And once people started pulling on the thread, the whole thing started to unravel. Let's go back to the beginning. Way back, before the marriage, before the empire, before the crown. Even during her Destiny's Child days, there were whispers. The kind you heard from people who worked the circuit, people who saw things and kept their mouths shut because they needed their jobs. And the most persistent of those stories was about the clubs. According to a source who spilled the tea back in the day, Beyoncé was allegedly spotted at a venue famous for its extremely adult shows, surrounded by a massive security presence, with curtains pulled around the table like everybody there knew exactly what they came to see. And the eyewitness account, and I want to be careful here because this is exactly the kind of claim that needs receipts, described Beyoncé up on a table in the VIP balcony cheering as performers did their thing on stage, right out in the open, in front of people, until nearly 4 in the morning. Now you tell me something. Does that sound like the same woman who presents herself as the most private, the most controlled, the most disciplined artist of her generation? The woman whose public image is built on composure so flawless that people write doctoral theses about her stage presence? Because to a lot of people, that description sounds like somebody living an entirely different life than the one she sells. And here's the part that should really make you stop. That club story, as wild as it is just the tip of the iceberg. And if that is the tip, I do not even want to know what the rest of it looks like. Behind the scenes, people connected to that world started talking, and one of the names that kept coming up was the woman who helped assemble her. I would not have. That is it. That was the whole rebuttal. No, I would not have. Explain how. No, I would not have. Walk us through the math. No, I would not have. Girl, that is not an argument. That is a ringtone. You cannot debate a documented offer with a shrug and a period. When somebody shows you 2 million in ink and you answer with nah, you have not defended your bag. You have defended your ego. And those are two very different accounts. And the beautiful, tragic irony of all of it, the person in the comments was not even being cruel. They said, hey, no surprise that fighters make more than the disclosed number, but you still would have made more total money taking the cyborg offer. That is not hate. That is arithmetic. And the self-crowned GWAT treated arithmetic like a personal attack, because at this point, anything that does not arrive with applause gets treated like a punch. But hold that thought, because the money comments are only the appetizer. The main course is a video, a bouquet of flowers, and a song that was never about her. And when we get back to it, you're going to understand why half the internet thinks Papoose is playing chess while she is still looking for the checkerboard. But first, we have to talk about the man himself, the tattoo, and the look on his face that said everything his mouth would not. Now let us get into the love story, if we can even call it that, because this chapter has more red flags than a beach during hurricane season. And before anybody says I am reaching, let me be clear. This is commentary on things that were posted publicly, discussed publicly, and screenshotted into eternity. The internet did not invent this saga. The internet just refused to let it die. So here's the scene. Papoose, veteran rapper, famously the devoted husband of Remy Ma for years, now publicly booed up with Claressa Shields. While, and this is the part that matters, he is still legally married. Not divorced, not finalized. Married, with paperwork, while the new relationship is getting soft-launched and hard-launched at the same time. And the self-proclaimed A-list celebrity is out here posting flowers. Now on the surface, flowers are sweet. Everybody loves flowers. Except the internet remembers, because the internet always remembers, that not long before this, she was practically on her knees in the public square hinting, nudging, and outright campaigning for this man to buy her flowers. And when the flowers finally arrived, what did Claressa Shields do? She posted them. Which, fine. Normal couple behavior. Except she posted them while playing a song. And here is where the whole thing tips over. The song she chose was a record Papoose made for Remy Ma. For his wife. About his wife. Years ago. A record that line for line is about a completely different woman. Let me say that again slowly, because it deserves the slow walk. She received flowers, got excited, hit record, and chose, out of every song ever made in the history of recorded music, the love ballad her man wrote for the wife he is not divorced yet. And not one line of that song is about her. Not a bar. Not a metaphor. Not a single syllable. And when a commenter simply pointed this out, not with hate, just with honest confusion, basically asking why Claressa Shields was posting a video soundtracked by a song he made for his actual wife, she jumped into the replies arguing that it is his song and his wife's song. Baby, read that sentence back to yourself in the mirror. It is his song and his wife's song. Congratulations. You have successfully explained why everybody is confused. Is you the wife? Because the paperwork says otherwise. The paperwork has a whole different name on it, and that name is Remy Ma. And do not think Remy Ma is some background character in this movie. Remy Ma is the whole reason this triangle has gravity. Because by every public account, the queen did not leave. She got left. And the details that have floated around for over a year now paint a picture that, if even half of it holds, should embarrass everybody involved. We are talking about the same timeline where she was allegedly cozying up to Remy for styling advice, reportedly asking the wife herself for pointers on how to dress. Chew on that. Asking the wife how to dress while allegedly ending up with the husband. If that is how it went down, that is not a love story. That is a heist film. And Remy Ma is the one who got robbed in her own house. Now, is some of this rumor and alley talk? Sure. And I will always flag the difference between a court document and a group chat. But where there is this much smoke for this long, somebody is at least grilling. And speaking of things that are hard to explain away, let us talk about the tattoo. Because the tattoo timeline is where this story stops being messy and starts being suspicious. So Claressa Shields reportedly went and got her man's name inked on her arm early. Like way early, in the public phase of this relationship. Bold move. Permanent move. The kind of move you make when you think you are locked in for life. And for months it sat there on her arm, solo, unmatched, because Papoose did not have her name anywhere on his body. Nothing. Not a letter. And people noticed. Interviewers noticed. There is a clip floating around where somebody asks him point blank, so when are you getting her name tatted? And I need you to understand, the look he gave that interviewer could freeze liquor. If looks could kill, that man would have needed a coffin, a pastor, and a choir. He looked at that interviewer like the man had just insulted his entire bloodline. And then, and this is the part that makes you go home, days before one of her big fight weeks, suddenly, magically, Papoose shows up with fresh ink of her name. Now think about how real couples do this. When two people are genuinely drunk in love and decide to get name tattoos, they usually do it together. Same shop, same day, same adrenaline. What they do not usually do is have one person get inked a year early and the other person get inked right before the biggest cameras of the year are pointed at them, right after the timeline got flamed on the internet for looking one-sided. You do not need a detective badge to see why people are side-eyeing that sequence. And I am stamping opinion on this. In my opinion, it looked less like romance and more like reputation management. Like somebody said, the internet is cooking us, go fix it, and the fix came out of a tattoo gun. And here is the deeper question that keeps me up at night. Why is a grown man, a veteran of this culture, letting his love life get stage managed like a public relations crisis? And why does a woman who claims every room she walks into belongs to her keep accepting the discount version of everything? The flowers she had to beg the algorithm for. The tattoo that arrived like a late invoice. The relationship status that still legally belongs to somebody else. This is the GWAT? This is the A-lister? Because from the outside, it does not look like she is being adored. It looks like she is being managed. And honestly, it looks like everybody can see it except her. You want to know what A-list actually looks like? I will show you. But first, let us rewind to a claim she made that aged like milk in the sun, because she did not just call herself A-list. She dared the internet to fact-check her resume. And baby, the internet brought a forklift. The claim was essentially this. I am an A-list celebrity, for real. Act accordingly. Okay, so the internet did what the internet does. It started pulling tape. And one of the first questions that came up was, where was the coronation? Where was the big mainstream press run when she was actually at her competitive peak? Because The Breakfast Club, the biggest morning platform in the culture, the show every actual A-lister passes through, where was that interview back in the day? Where was the sit-down with Charlemagne and DJ Envy when the belts were fresh? I am asking sincerely. Pull the clip. I will wait. Because for a self-declared A-lister, the mainstream footprint from her actual championship prime is shockingly thin. And a huge slice of the general public genuinely could not pick her out of a lineup until the last couple of years, when the fame finally arrived, mostly through controversy, not coronation. And that right there is the crack in the crown. Real A-listers get famous for the work and then survive the controversy. She is getting famous for the controversy and keeps pointing back at the work. Those are two different careers, and deep down, I think she knows it, which is exactly why the comment section has become her second office. But hold on, because we still have not talked about the funeral, the security team, and the single most jaw-dropping power move in this entire saga. And when you hear it, you are going to understand why even some of her own defenders went quiet. Now let us talk about the interview moment that should be studied in journalism schools, because it tells you exactly how this whole machine operates. She sat down for a conversation, and the topic of a controversial incident came up, and her entire defense was built on one sentence. It did not happen the way they say it happened. Okay, fine. That is a start. So the interviewer does what interviewers do. How did it happen? And the answer that came back was essentially, it just did not happen the way they say. And when they pressed again, she circled the same drain. It was like watching a GPS reroute back into the same lake over and over. And here is why that matters more than any single comment war. When a public figure cannot complete the sentence "here is what actually happened," one of two things is true. Either the truth is worse than the rumor, or there is no version of the truth that survives daylight. Neither option is good. And the fan club watched that same clip and heard nothing wrong, because the fan club does not audit. The fan club applauds. That is the difference between a supporter and a shield wall. And she has built herself the finest shield wall money cannot buy. And let us be precise about the word hater, because it is doing more work in this story than her jab ever did. In this ecosystem, hater no longer means a person who hates. It means a person who quotes. That is it. If you repeat her own words back to her, you are a hater. If you read the disclosed purse number out loud, you are a hater. If you ask why the song about the wife is soundtracking the girlfriend's flowers, you are a hater. The word has been stretched so wide it now covers arithmetic, calendars, and her own upload history. And words stretched that wide snap back, because the public eventually figures out the trick. And once the public sees the trick, every future defense gets read as misdirection. That is exactly where she is right now, and she got there one reply at a time. Now here is the question her circle should be terrified of, and I have not heard a single person ask it. Who benefits from all of this? Because it is not her legacy. Every day Claressa Shields spends arguing with strangers. The actual business of being the greatest sits untouched. There are little girls in Flint who need the version of her that showed up to the Olympics twice and willed herself onto that podium. There is a whole women's boxing economy that needs its biggest name making fights, not replies. And instead, the daily output is name-calling, purse-inflation, and relationship defense on behalf of a man who has not yet finalized his own paperwork. Meanwhile, Papoose stays relatively quiet. Think about that. She fights the internet's battles daily, and the person the battles are mostly about keeps a low profile and lets her absorb every punch. That is not partnership math. That is exposure math. And she is the one standing in front of the lens. Let me also address the role model question head-on, because the fan club loves to hide behind it. She says she is a role model. Beautiful. Necessary. This culture needs them. But role models are not crowned by announcement. They are confirmed by pattern. And the pattern here, publicly, includes mocking strangers, escalating feuds, turning an altercation into entertainment, and treating accountability like an opponent to duck. You do not get to claim the title on Monday and violate the job description Tuesday through Sunday. The little girls watching do not separate the champion from the comment section, because she does not separate them. She is the one who merged the two. She brought the ring into the replies, and now she is upset that the replies hit back. And can we talk about the stamina for a second? Because honestly, it is almost impressive. The average celebrity melts down in the comments once, maybe twice a year, and it becomes a whole news cycle. Claressa Shields treats it like cardio. Morning session, evening session, weekend bonus rounds. And every session follows the same choreography. Provocation, overreaction, screenshot, ratio, and then the post claiming she is unbothered. Baby, the unbothered do not file daily reports. Think about what it means for an artist whose entire empire was built on instinct, on an almost supernatural feel for what the world wants to sing, to suddenly stop trusting that instinct at the exact moment he needed it most. Every record before the battle was a calculator's dream. Every move after it has felt like a man arguing with the scoreboard. And the tragedy, the genuine tragedy, is that the skill never left him. The hooks are still in there. The melodies are still in there. What changed was the posture. And posture is everything in this sport. The audience can smell desperation through a pair of headphones. They can smell confidence too. One man made a song so confident the world turned it into a national anthem. The other man made a lawsuit. History is not confused about which is which. And we need to say this plainly, because it keeps getting lost in the noise. Being a phenomenal hitmaker and being a battle rapper are two completely different crafts, and the culture did itself a disservice pretending they were the same credential. One craft is about giving millions of strangers a feeling they want to live inside. The other is about taking one specific man apart in front of the entire world with nothing but rhythm and vocabulary. Drake mastered the first craft so completely that everyone, maybe including Drake himself, assumed the second one came with the package. It did not. It never did. The warning signs were there in every skirmish that came before. Look at the pattern honestly. The battles he won were won on tempo, on hooks, on flooding the zone with catchy material until the other side drowned in it. That is a legitimate weapon, but it only works against opponents who need the same oxygen. Against a man who does not care about radio, who disappears for years and returns with a Pulitzer, who treats every verse like a deposition, the flood strategy has nothing to flood. You cannot outchant a man who is not competing for the chant. And that mismatch, that fundamental misunderstanding of what the fight actually was, explains everything that happened next. And if you want proof that the lesson still had not landed, look at what came after the funeral. Because the months following the battle produced a stretch of releases that had the entire culture scratching its head in unison. Records that kept jabbing at a ghost. Songs asking what did I miss, when the honest answer was everything. A rollout teased like a horror franchise. All masked figures and ominous trailers, built to convince the world the war was still raging at the exact moment the world had already buried it. Malone's reaction was the one you only get from somebody who actually roots for you. He was not mocking it. He was confused by it. This is a man who had spent years telling anyone who would listen that Drake was a genuinely good MC, and even he could not decode the strategy. Get back to your strengths, he said, in essence. Stop swinging at an opponent who already left the ring. And that critique lands so much harder than any Stan War insult, because it comes from concern, not contempt. There is a particular kind of pain in watching a fighter with legendary tools keep reaching for the wrong one. The hooks were always the superpower. The anthems were always the empire. And somewhere in the scramble to prove the loss never happened, the greatest hitmaker of his generation forgot the single thing that made him inevitable in the first place. And while we are talking about the anatomy of a loss, we have to talk about the silence around it. Because one of the loudest parts of this whole story is who never spoke. The industry machine that spent a decade orbiting Drake, the streaming platforms that plastered his face on every playlist cover, the media ecosystem that treated his every release like a national holiday. When the verdict of the culture came down, that machine had nothing to say. No emergency summit. No counter-programming that landed. Just the slow, awkward realization that for the first time in a decade, the biggest artist in the world needed defending, and nobody with a platform wanted the job. That silence told its own story. And the people who did speak, the Malones of the world, the ones with actual history and nothing to gain, all told some version of the same story. Not that Drake was finished, but that Drake had finally revealed the ceiling of the strategy that made him. Dominance through ubiquity works until the day the culture decides to judge you on a single battlefield, under the oldest rules in the book. It is also worth stepping back and looking at what this whole chapter did to the audience itself, because that is the part nobody monetizes correctly. For 10 years, listeners were trained to believe that numbers were the argument. Biggest first week. Most chart entries. Longest streak. The battle of 2024 snapped that spell in half. In the space of 8 weeks, the culture remembered that the scoreboard and the crown are two different things, and that the crown has never once been decided by a spreadsheet. An entire generation of rap fans got to watch the old laws get enforced in real time. Answer the record. Respect the ring. Never let them see you reach for the referee. These are not rules anybody wrote down. They are rules everybody knows. And the enforcement of them was not cruel. It was, if anything, overdue. That is why the celebration was so loud. It was not just about one man winning. It was about the sport itself getting its soul back. There is one more thread from that interview that deserves the spotlight, because it explains the emotional core of everything Malone said. When he talked about watching the battle, he described it as watching his young homie go to war against somebody from a record label they both came up under. Sit with how strange and rare that position is. The Battle of 2024 was not just a clash between two fan bases. It was a clash between two families that used to be one family. Cash Money, Young Money, the West Coast lineage, the shared features, the shared festivals, the shared decade. Everybody in that orbit knew everybody. And when the war went hot, every single person in that orbit had to make a quiet decision about where they stood, and most of them made it by saying nothing at all. Malone is notable precisely because he refused the silence. He said what the entire middle of the industry was thinking but was too entangled, too employed, or too afraid to say. And he said it with love for both sides, which is exactly why it landed like an indictment. The most damaging testimony never comes from your enemies. It comes from the friend who walks into the room, puts a hand on your shoulder, and tells the truth anyway. And here is the layer almost nobody wants to touch, because it is the most human part of the entire saga. Strip away the plaques and the streams and the stadiums, and what you are left with is a story about two men who were once on the same side of history. Remember, these are artists who came up saluting each other. Early features, shared stages, public respect. There was a version of the future where the two biggest rappers of their generation stayed allies, traded verses for 20 years, and retired as the genre's greatest friendship. That version died somewhere between a rejected feature and a big three coronation, and the culture is still grieving it, whether it admits that or not. That grief is the engine under all the engagement. People are not just consuming a battle. They are processing a breakup. The most famous Cold War in music finally went hot, and everybody who grew up on both catalogs got drafted into a side they never asked to choose. That is why every new detail, every leaked conversation, every podcast confession lands like an aftershock. The audience is not looking for gossip. They are looking for closure. And closure is the one thing this story has refused to give anyone. Which is exactly why the Malone account matters more than the hundreds of hours of commentary that came before it. Most of the battle coverage was noise. Fans litigating syllables. Bots inflating narratives. Channels farming outrage. But every once in a while, a primary source walks into the room, and the whole discourse has to reorganize itself around what they say. That is what happened here. A man with no dog in the fight beyond friendship, no brand deal riding on the outcome, no algorithm to feed, sat down and calmly redrew the map. And the map he drew shows the same thing from every angle. The ambush was a myth. The warning was real. The response was improvised genius, not a boardroom operation. And the aftermath, the cease and desist reports, the lawsuit, the records poking at the ashes, was not strategy. It was the sound of an empire hearing laughter for the first time and not knowing what to do with it. And let's be honest about the elephant in the boardroom, because no honest account of this era is complete without it. When the battle ended, the most powerful man in music did not respond the way powerful men in this genre have always responded. He did not go back to the lab. He did not assemble a team of the sharpest pens money could buy and return with a record so undeniable that the culture had no choice but to respect it. That option was always on the table. It is still on the table. Instead, the response went through lawyers, and that choice told the world something no diss record ever could. It said the music was no longer the arena where this man believed he could win. For an artist who spent 15 years insisting he was the genre's final boss, that is not a legal strategy. That is a confession. And the entire culture heard it, whether they were willing to say it out loud or not. And for anyone still clinging to the numbers argument, let's settle that right now, because it is the last shelter the losing side has left. Yes, the commercial statistics are absurd. Yes, the chart records may never be touched. But understand something about the history of this art form. Every single era eventually stops being measured in sales and starts being measured in moments. Nobody sits around today debating first-week scans from 2001. They debate the records. They debate the battles. They debate who stood tall when the culture demanded a verdict. Takeover versus Ether is not a spreadsheet conversation. The bridge is over is not a spreadsheet conversation. And 20 years from now, when the streaming tallies of 2024 are trivia nobody can recite, the only thing anyone will remember is a stadium full of people in Los Angeles chanting in unison while the biggest pop star on earth watched his name become a punchline. That is not hate. That is just how memory works in this genre. The scoreboard fades. The moment is forever. So where does that leave the legacy question? Because that is what all of this is really about now. Kendrick Lamar walked out of 2024 with his mythology not just intact, but expanded. The recluse who warned everybody. The writer who needed no vault. The competitor who never once stepped outside the bounds of the sport. And Drake walked out with the same numbers he always had, plus a question mark he never used to carry. Not about his talent. Nobody honest questions the talent. The question is about what happens when the talent loses. When the machine cannot chart its way out. When the only remaining move is a legal filing, and the whole culture is watching to see whether a man who built his name on records will stand behind the ones he made. And do not mistake this for an ending, because the next act is already being written in court filings and release schedules. The lawsuit has to survive judges who will be asked to decide whether a diss record can defame anyone in a genre built on defamation, and whatever happens, the precedent will echo through every battle that comes after it. Meanwhile, both camps are moving. New music is coming. Old alliances are being tested. And somewhere in Los Angeles, the man who said just watch is almost certainly watching again, quiet as ever, letting the world wonder what he already knows. That is the scariest part of all. The silence was never empty. It never is. The history books of this genre are ruthless about one thing above all else. They do not remember the excuses. They remember the moments. And the moment this era will be remembered for is not a courtroom sketch or a streaming record. It is a city singing in unison. It is a friend on the phone saying you in a fight. It is a warning that said, just watch, and a world that did not listen until it was far too late. And one last thought on J. Cole before we close, because his chapter is the one people keep skipping. J. Cole made the most human decision of the whole war. He felt the disrespect, stepped up, fired back, and then listened to the voice in his chest that said this is not who you are. The culture mocked him for it in the moment, but look at where everyone landed. J. Cole is the only one of the three who walked away with his peace fully intact. No lawsuits, no scars that needed explaining, no legacy question hanging over his head. History may end up judging his exit as the smartest move any of them made. Cole saw the cliff before anybody else did, and he simply refused to drive off it. Now I want to hear from you, because this one is going to split the room right down the middle. Was the lawsuit a smart businessman protecting a billion-dollar brand, or the single worst move in battle rap history? And be honest with yourself. Did Glasses Malone just change how you see the entire war? Or was your mind already made up before you clicked? Sound off in the comments, because I read every single one. If you are new here, hit subscribe and turn the notifications on, because the next layer of this story is already unfolding. There are court dates on the calendar and documents that have not seen daylight yet, and when they drop, this whole conversation is going to look completely different. Trust me, you are going to want to be here for that one.